For over a decade, Milla Jovovich was the undisputed queen of Hollywood action films. From teenage supermodel to devoted mother, she conquered Hollywood with films like The Fifth Element and the Resident Evil franchise, then decided to step away at the height of her success. This is her story. With science fiction blockbusters, and especially her iconic role as Alice, she became one of the most recognizable and highest-grossing actresses in the genre. Her character Alice grossed over $1.23 billion across 6 films, establishing her as a true global superstar. But after the end of Resident Evil in 2017 and her final major production, Monster Hunter, in 2020, Milla virtually disappeared from the big screen. What really happened to the actress VH1 dubbed the Kick-Ass Queen? Was it a personal decision, or did circumstances force her to step away? That's what we're about to find out. Milla Bogdanovna Jovovich was born on December 17, 1975, in Kiev, when Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union. Her father, Bogdan Jovovich, was a Serbian pediatrician, and her mother, Galina Loginova, was a Soviet theater actress of Russian descent. This unique cultural mix, Serbian, Russian, and Ukrainian, deeply shaped the cosmopolitan personality that would characterize her entire career. When Milla was 5, her family emigrated to London in search of better opportunities. They later moved to Sacramento, California, and finally settled in Los Angeles, where her life would change forever. This experience of constantly moving and adapting to different cultures gave Milla a global perspective and the ability to speak fluent Russian, English, and French. Her entry into the world of modeling was entirely by chance. At 9 years old, while walking through a mall with her mother in Los Angeles, she was discovered by a talent scout. Her exotic beauty and expressive gaze immediately caught the attention of the fashion industry. At age 11, Milla was already working professionally as a model when legendary photographer Richard Avedon chose her to star in a Revlon campaign called The World's Most Unforgettable Women. This campaign immediately catapulted her to modeling stardom, making her one of the most sought-after models of the decade. During her teenage years, Milla worked with the world's most prestigious brands: L'Oréal, Banana Republic, Christian Dior, Versace, and Chanel. Her face appeared in the most important magazines, and she walked the most exclusive runways in Paris, Milan, and New York. By the age of 16, she was already considered an established supermodel. However, Milla always had aspirations beyond modeling. In 1988, at age 13, she made her film debut in the television movie Night Train to Kathmandu. That same year, she appeared in her first feature film, Two Moon Junction, albeit in a very small role. Her true acting breakthrough came in 1991 with Return to the Blue Lagoon, the remake of the classic film starring Brooke Shields. In this film, Milla played Lily, a young shipwrecked girl growing up on a tropical island. Although the film received mixed reviews, Milla's performance was praised and showed that she had potential beyond her beauty. The experience of Return to the Blue Lagoon was both exciting and challenging for young Milla. At 16, she had to deal with nude scenes and an on-screen romantic relationship that caused her to mature rapidly professionally. The film was a moderate commercial success, but more importantly, it established Milla as a serious actress. In 1992, at the age of 16, Milla made a decision that surprised everyone. She married Shawn Andrews, her 21-year-old co-star in the film Dazed and Confused. However, her mother quickly intervened, and the marriage was annulled after just 2 months. This marked the beginning of a pattern of intense relationships that would characterize her personal life for years. Over the next few years, Milla alternated between modeling and small film roles, seeking to find her place in Hollywood. In 1994, she surprised everyone again by releasing a music album titled The Divine Comedy, proving that her artistic talents knew no bounds. Although the album wasn't a massive commercial success, it showcased her versatility as an artist. The real turning point in Milla's career came in 1997, when French director Luc Besson cast her in The Fifth Element alongside Bruce Willis. In this science fiction film, Milla played Lilu, a supreme being created to save humanity. The Fifth Element was an immediate cultural phenomenon. With a budget of $90 million, the film grossed over $263 million worldwide and became an instant sci-fi classic. Milla's performance as Lilu was absolutely memorable. She created a completely new language for the character and managed to convey innocence, power, and vulnerability simultaneously. The film not only established Milla as a legitimate science fiction actress, but also changed her personal life. During filming, she began a relationship with Luc Besson, and they married in 1997. Although the marriage lasted only 2 years, Besson directed her again in Joan of Arc 1999, where she played the French heroine in one of her most ambitious performances. Joan of Arc allowed Milla to demonstrate her full dramatic range. The film required intense physical acting, complex emotional monologues, and the ability to carry a historical epic on her own. Although the film received mixed reviews, Milla's performance was widely praised. After her divorce from Besson, Milla focused on diversifying her career. She appeared in films like The Fourth Kind, 2009, where she played a psychologist investigating alleged alien abductions and continued to alternate between commercial and more artistic projects. However, the role that would completely transform her career came in 2002 when she was cast in Resident Evil, the film adaptation of the popular Capcom video game. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, the film featured Alice, a former Umbrella Corporation employee who wakes up with no memory in an underground facility filled with zombies. Initially, Milla almost turned down the project. The studio had cast Michelle Rodriguez in a major role, and the writers rewrote the script, giving Rodriguez more prominence to Milla's character. "I almost quit the movie," she revealed years later. "I didn't get the new draft until I was flying from Canada to Germany. When we landed in Berlin, I was furious." Milla confronted director Paul W.S. Anderson at his hotel, and they spent 3 hours reviewing the script page by page until they reached an agreement. This intense work session not only saved the film, but also marked the beginning of a professional and personal collaboration that would last decades. Resident Evil was an unexpected hit. With a budget of just $33 million, the film grossed over $102 million worldwide. Milla's performance as Alice was flawless. She created a character who was simultaneously vulnerable and lethal, human and superhuman. Her intense physical training and dedication to action sequences established her as a true action star. The success of Resident Evil immediately led to sequels. Milla reprised her role as Alice in Resident Evil Apocalypse, 2004, Resident Evil Extinction, 2007, Resident Evil Afterlife, 2010, Resident Evil Retribution, 2012, and Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, 2017. Over the course of 15 years, the saga became one of the most successful video game adaptations in history, grossing over $1.23 billion worldwide. Each film required months of intense physical training, 3 hours a day of combat training, martial arts, weapons handling, and acrobatics. However, it was during the production of these films that her personal life found stability. Her relationship with Paul Anderson, which had begun during that 2002 script rewrite session, gradually deepened. They married in 2009, and their professional collaboration blossomed into a full-fledged creative partnership. In 2007, Milla gave birth to her first child, Eva Garbo Anderson. Motherhood completely changed her priorities and perspectives. In an emotional interview, Milla revealed, "When Eva was born, I suddenly understood there was something bigger than any movie or role. Looking into her eyes for the first time completely transformed me. I was no longer just Milla the actress. I was Milla the mother, and that became my most important identity." Her second daughter, Dashiell Eden Anderson, was born in 2015, followed by her third daughter, Ocean Lark Elliott Jovovich Anderson, in 2020. With each birth, Milla gradually stepped back from the more demanding aspects of her career. In 2017, with Resident Evil: The Final Chapter, Milla officially closed the most important chapter of her film career. "I'm not ready to say goodbye to Alice. That's been one of the hardest things in the world," she declared emotionally. The film included a special personal touch. Her daughter, Eva Anderson, appeared as a younger version of Alice, perfectly symbolizing how Milla was passing the torch to the next generation. After the end of Resident Evil, Milla was very selective with her projects. In 2020, she reunited with Paul Anderson for Monster Hunter, another video game adaptation in which she played Captain Natalie Artemis. However, the film was a critical and commercial failure, grossing only $47.9 million worldwide, against a budget of $60 million. Monster Hunter proved problematic from multiple angles. The film was pulled from Chinese theaters after just 3 days due to a line of dialogue perceived as racist. Furthermore, the reviews were devastating, with many fans feeling the film didn't capture the spirit of the original video game. For Milla, the failure of Monster Hunter seemed to confirm that it was time to step away from big-budget productions. At 45, she had achieved everything she'd ever dreamed of in terms of a film career, and her priorities had completely changed. Since 2020, Milla has kept a much lower profile in Hollywood. Her main focus is raising her 3 daughters and supporting her family's artistic ambitions. Her daughter Eva Anderson has begun following in her acting footsteps, appearing in Disney Plus's Peter Pan and Wendy in 2023. Currently, Milla divides her time between Los Angeles and other locations, prioritizing her family's privacy. She has stated in recent interviews that she is open to returning to film for the right project, but only if it doesn't interfere with her responsibilities as a mother. Her only confirmed projects are In the Lost Lands, a fantasy film co-starring Dave Bautista, and an action thriller in which she plays a former war heroine. However, both projects have remained low profile, and their release dates are uncertain. Several factors contributed to Milla's gradual withdrawal from major Hollywood productions. First, after 15 years of playing physically demanding characters, her body had taken a considerable toll. The accumulated injuries from performing her own stunts had created long-term health problems. Second, the film industry had changed significantly. The kind of mid-budget action films that had been Milla's hallmark were no longer as commercially viable. Studios were increasingly focusing on massive superhero franchises or streaming content, genres where Milla had no established experience. Third, and most importantly, motherhood had completely redefined her priorities. "Being a mother is my greatest achievement," she declared in a recent interview. "I can make 1,000 movies, but nothing compares to watching my daughters grow up and being present at every important moment in their lives." The idea of spending months away from home in remote locations no longer appealed to her. Finally, Milla had reached a level of financial security that allowed her to be extremely selective. The residuals from the Resident Evil franchise and her smart investments gave her the freedom to choose projects based on passion rather than financial necessity. Now at 49, Milla Jovovich has found a balance that works for her. She's managed to maintain her cultural relevance without sacrificing her personal life, something very few stars of her generation have achieved. Her legacy in action cinema is undeniable. Films like The Fifth Element and the Resident Evil franchise remain benchmarks in the genre, and her portrayal of Alice inspired a whole generation of action heroines. For over a decade, Milla redefined what it meant to be a female action star. Milla Jovovich's story teaches us several important lessons about Hollywood and success. Her determination to put family before fame demonstrates a maturity that many stars struggle to achieve. Her decision to step away at the height of her success challenges traditional notions of ambition in the entertainment industry. More importantly, Milla has proven that it's possible to reinvent yourself at different stages of life. Her transition from teenage model to dramatic actress, then to action star, and finally to devoted mother demonstrates impressive adaptability. For fans who miss seeing Milla in major productions, her previous work remains enormously influential. Her impact on science fiction and action cinema continues to inspire new generations of filmmakers and actresses. In an industry known for discarding female stars after a certain age, Milla has found a way to maintain her dignity and relevance while living a life that fulfills her personally. Her story isn't one of decline or failure, but rather one of conscious evolution and well-defined priorities. And well, that was the complete story of how Milla Jovovich chose to redefine success on her own terms, a lesson in the value of putting personal authenticity above external expectations and the importance of family over fame. If you enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more fascinating stories about Hollywood careers. See you in the next video.